Hello, my virtual friends. I want to talk to you about an important experience that I had last week, and I want you to judge all that fairly. Please listen to my words carefully and feel free to react also fairly if you like. The story starts when our last English televised discussion with me as host and Mr. Kuresh Zaim from Iran and Mr. Bijan Iftikhari from America as guests started with the title of Political Islam in Agony. It was censored simply by the director of Rank Command, something that surprised me, of course, surprised all of us. It was aired on 14th August. On Rank Command TV, of course, and it's YouTube as well, by the staff of Rank Command, of course. But a couple of hours later, it was removed by an order of the director. First from the TV and a few days later from the YouTube. In fact, it was censored. Probably the director was not in line with one of my guests, namely Mr. Zaim, or eventually Mr. Iftikhari. Of course, not with me, because I have been doing the job for the last 4 or 5 months in 3 languages, namely English, French, and German. And no, there was no problem with him. But not with Mr. Iftikhari, because Mr. Iftikhari has been also a few times my guest in my English-speaking programs. It was very likely against Mr. Khurshid from the leadership of the Iranian National Front, either with against his ideas or against his position in the leadership. That could be the likely reason for the censorship. Let me firstly say that I regard the censorship as an offensive attitude to free journalism, to free expressions, to free thoughts, and a bad treatment of all of us who were victimized by this attitude. That means I, as host, and my 2 guests. Such a censorship exists in totalitarian regimes, like that in Iran. The Islamic regime, as a totalitarian regime, censors all media, all televisions, and everything that can make public debates in Iran. The expressions of thought, ideas, and even individual rights to wear whatever I want, to eat whatever I want, to think whatever I want, also are not allowed in Iran. But why in Europe? Why in France? So expression of thought, especially when the thoughts are opposing the regime, is something that happens also in the democratic world. I don't want to give any comment for that now because it's too soon. But only I just say that's not a democratic, a secular, and a logical attitude. For any reason, no television should censor another program, another person. They can answer, they can comment, they can probably do something else. I don't know, but not censor. Censorship is a very bad attitude. It's worse than someone who probably has done something wrong in this program, in his talks. Censorship actually is used by dictatorial systems to curb and suppress people, to receive the news which the system or the regime does not want to. Because censorship alienates people from the outlets of desired news, from the good news, the news that probably encourage people to react against the dictatorship, to demand their fundamental rights, to protest, to go in the streets and protest against the dictatorial or totalitarian regime. That's the reason the censorship exists. When the news are hidden or marginalized, the regime can probably survive. When not, people react. That's normal. Therefore, at the first inauguration debate with the director of this television, I told him directly and honestly that I am an independent activist and I want to keep my independence as a journalist, as presenter, which is also professionally correct. And he did not respect my independence. Let me express my points in another way, in this form, that the common law principle, the common law which is also a kind of moral and current norms in an advanced society, allows individuals to have the right by any means, under any circumstances, to tell the truth and to hear that truth. That's a fundamental right. This principle has been even codified in many articles of laws, articles of morals, in many constitutions, in many philosophy of different companies. So therefore, I challenge, and we have to challenge any kind of censorship, no matter for which reason. And the freedom of express is untouchable. In any democratic country, that's a fundamental right. And we want that also for for the future of Iran. In pre-Iran, we must have also no censorship at all. Trustful presenters and journalists who are saying the truth without deforming that, without alleviating that, just pure truth. They can spark it, they can encourage people to understand their destiny, to fight for their rights. And this must be, I think, a duty of Iranian diaspora, because we have the possibility to be free, to think free, and to respect this freedom. So why not our people should learn that? Why should our people should not learn that democracy means also no censorship? And when we are diaspora, we are millions of Iranians in the democratic countries. We must be actually the examples of free and open exchange of ideas and thoughts, and to inform our oppressed people in Iran about important issues so they can make good choices. They can be encouraged to stand up against the barbarian Islamic regime. This way actually is an important destiny of our people. That's the reason censorship or self-censorship, which is actually a complementary part of censorship. When we have censorship, self-censorship will be also somehow imposed through think tanks of the Islamic regime, with, of course, some psychological mechanisms or tricky mechanisms, if you like. And when the censorship, such a censorship, practiced by journalists, consciously or non-consciously, or be practiced in media like television or journalists or newspapers. It stifles, gradually, it stifles the free flow of information and restricts knowledge of our people. And ultimately brings grist to the mill of the Islamic regime. That's very important. The profiteer of such a censorship will be the regime itself, the main profiteer. It creates because a void into which steps the regime or its allies, like apologists, think tanks, I would say mercenaries, to reinvent absolute inaction or pacifism, to discourage people to protest against the barbarian regime, to demand their fundamental rights. Each person is bound by these fundamental rights as a free person. We know that through philosophy of John Locke. And that is the point, that censorship prevents this fundamental right. And totalitarian regime needs also this prevention. And not only they propaganda, they promote the absolute pacifism, inaction, and try to convince people to tolerate the regime by putting, for example, as I told, by putting the lipstick on the pig to show another face, not the ugly face, but another face of the regime, which can be okay, tolerated, alleviated, and somehow acceptable for people who have no other choice, who have to accept anyhow. But that would increase also in Iranian diaspora because of the influence of the think tanks of the regime in this field. And that is what the problem is for us. We lived in democratic countries, but the non-democratic think tanks convince us with their language, with their tricks, to follow their lines. In fact, the lines that kept the regime survived, and we don't want that. We don't want the parasitic life of the regime even one single day. So that's the main problem we have with them. At the end, I leave my my link, of course, not the link of television because it has been removed from television, from YouTube, but I have that on my Zoom, of course, our Zoom. Mr. Ibtikhari recorded that, and I let the link here just to see, to judge yourself. You won't find any single offensive word or immoral statement from none of us in this discussion. The only reason that it was removed was the fact that the director of Rangit Kaman could not tolerate one of us, and I think that was Mr. Kurush Zaim, who is one of the leaders of the National Front in Iran. And probably the director could not accept his ideas or his position in the leadership. Please let your comments, your feedbacks, and I will be very pleased to see them, and I will answer them, of course. Thank you very much. See you probably another time. I'll keep probably I take a rest firstly, and then if I find some independent television that accept also my independence, I continue this 3-language program: German, English, French, namely for the second and third Iranian generations, and also for all audience, for all English or French or German audience. Why not? And I hope I found a good place, some honest televisions that I can do my moral and national duty as someone who can express himself through few languages for second and third generation of Iranians in Europe and America. Thank you very much, and see you probably another time later.